SpaceX had the contract for Artemis III. The problem is they're behind. That sentence came out of the mouth of the acting head of NASA. Not a critic, not a rival, not a space blogger, the man running the United States Space Agency. And what he said next made every SpaceX investor, every NASA engineer, and every person tracking the space race with China go very quiet, very fast. He said he was going to open the contract, let other companies compete, take whoever could get to the moon first. Sean Duffy, Transportation Secretary, acting NASA Administrator, speaking on CNBC's Squawk Box. October 20th, 2025. And in 2 minutes of television, he turned the most consequential aerospace contract of the 21st century into an open competition. Here's the full story. Because what happened between October 2025 and today involves 3 companies, 2 contract threats, 1 geopolitical race, multiple broken promises, and a complete restructuring of the mission that was supposed to return humans to the moon. Pull the thread on any single part of this, and you end up somewhere different than where the official press releases want you to look. Go back to April 2021. NASA awards SpaceX a $2.9 billion contract to build the human landing system for the Artemis III mission, the lander that will carry 2 astronauts down to the lunar South Pole and back up to orbit. SpaceX wins over Blue Origin and Dynetics in what was billed as a competitive selection. Blue Origin protests. The Government Accountability Office rejects the protest. NASA, under immense political pressure, eventually awards Blue Origin a separate $3.4 billion contract in May 2023 for its Blue Moon lander, but designates Starship HLS as the primary vehicle for Artemis III. Blue Moon gets the later missions, starting with Artemis V. The hierarchy is clear. SpaceX is first. Blue Origin is second. That is the arrangement that everyone agrees to in 2023, and that the Artemis program is built around. The arrangement starts falling apart almost immediately. In June 2023, NASA's Chief of Exploration Systems Development said that SpaceX's critical design review, the milestone that must be completed before NASA can release further funds under the contract, has been delayed. The reason? SpaceX has not yet completed an orbital propellant transfer demonstration. That demonstration, transferring liquid oxygen and methane between 2 Starship vehicles in orbit, is the foundational technology the entire Artemis architecture depends on. Without it, the tanker flights that fill the HLS vehicle in orbit before its lunar departure cannot be verified as feasible. NASA will not release the next tranche of contract funding until it is demonstrated. SpaceX does not demonstrate it on any of the 2023 Starship flights, or the 2024 flights, or the early 2025 flights. The GAO, the Government Accountability Office, puts it in black and white in November 2023. 8 out of 13 key HLS program milestones have been delayed by at least 6 months. 2 events have been pushed to the year of launch itself. The GAO identifies development of the Raptor engine as a top risk for the program timeline. Development of the Raptor engine, the same engine that Musk would later call part of a crazy hard problem, flagged as a top risk in a formal congressional report, a full 2 years before Musk said it publicly on X. The launch date slides. Artemis III was going to land on the moon in 2024, then 2025, then September 2026, then mid-2027. Each slip carries the same explanation. Development challenges with contractors. Each slip is announced, absorbed by the space community, and then followed by another slip. By October 2025, the ship-to-ship propellant transfer demonstration that NASA required before releasing full contract funding, originally scheduled for completion around summer 2025, had not happened. The design certification review has not happened. Neither had occurred as of March 2026, according to Wikipedia's documentation of the HLS program. The orbital refueling technology that the entire lunar landing architecture depends on has not been demonstrated in space at any point across 11 Starship test flights. That is the context in which Duffy walks onto Squawk Box and says what he says. He is not freelancing. He is describing a program that has slipped from 2024 to 2027 across 4 separate timeline adjustments, with the most technically complex undemonstrated milestone, orbital propellant transfer, still unresolved as the crunch point approaches. His words deserve to be quoted fully. SpaceX had the contract for Artemis III. The problem is they're behind. They push their timelines out and we're in a race against China. The president and I want to get to the moon during this president's term. So, I'm going to open up the contract. I'm going to let other space companies compete with SpaceX, like Blue Origin, and again, whatever one can get us there first, to the moon, we're going to take. We're not going to wait for one company. We're going to push this forward and win the second space race against the Chinese. 3 separate direct quotes. Not a paraphrase, not characterization. Those are Duffy's words from that interview, reported by CNBC, CNN, UPI, and Space.com. In government contracting, opening a contract to new competition is not a small bureaucratic gesture. It is a signal to investors, to contractors, to partner nations, and to China that the United States is willing to change course in the middle of a race rather than wait for a single vendor to catch up. Blue Origin's response was 2 words. Ready to support, not a press release, not a detailed proposal. 2 words. The kind of answer you give when you have been waiting for this phone call. NASA issued a formal statement. It gave SpaceX and Blue Origin until October 29th, 2025, 9 days, to present acceleration approaches for lunar lander development. 9 days to tell NASA how you plan to go faster. 9 days is not a planning horizon. It is a deadline designed to demonstrate urgency and to create a paper record of whether both companies responded meaningfully. NASA simultaneously announced it would issue a request for information to the broader commercial space industry, asking any company with relevant capability to describe how it could accelerate the U.S. return to the moon. RFIs in government contracting are informal fact-finding. They are not contracts. They are not commitments, but they are signals. And the signal this one sent, that NASA is at minimum considering options beyond its 2 existing HLS contractors, was significant enough to land in every major aerospace publication within hours. What happened after October 29th is not fully public. Neither SpaceX nor Blue Origin disclosed what they submitted. NASA did not publish the acceleration approaches it received. What is known from subsequent events is that the contract was not canceled, was not formally reopened to broad competition, and was not transferred from SpaceX to Blue Origin for Artemis III. What did happen is that the mission itself was fundamentally redesigned. By February 2026, 4 months after Duffy's interview, NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman announced a complete restructuring of Artemis III. The mission that was supposed to land on the moon was converted into an Earth orbit test flight. The lunar landing was moved to Artemis IV, targeting 2028. Artemis III, now targeting late 2027, would rendezvous with both HLS landers in low Earth orbit at approximately 460 kilometers altitude, test docking operations between Orion and the landers, evaluate the XMU spacesuit, and test propulsion, life support, and communication systems of the landers without ever leaving Earth orbit. It is broadly comparable to Apollo 9. It proves the hardware works together before anyone trusts their lives to it at the moon. Was Duffy's warning the cause of this restructuring? Not directly. The technical reality of what SpaceX and Blue Origin had not yet demonstrated, orbital propellant transfer, human rating certification, the full sequence of integration testing, made some version of a timeline revision inevitable, regardless of what any NASA administrator said publicly. But the public pressure Duffy applied, the open threat of contract competition, the explicit China framing, the 9-day deadline, created political cover and urgency for Isaacman to make a restructuring decision that previous administrators had been reluctant to announce. On April 27, 2026, Isaacman confirmed the late 2027 target for Artemis III before the House Appropriations Committee. He explained directly that the initial early 2027 target would be missed due to delays in both SpaceX's Starship HLS and Blue Origin's Blue Moon. Not one company, both companies. He received responses from both SpaceX and Blue Origin confirming they could meet the late 2027 rendezvous and docking objective in Earth orbit, not a crewed lunar landing certification, but a rendezvous and docking demonstration. That lower bar is what both companies are now working toward. The question the title of this video asks, will NASA reopen the contract, requires a more nuanced answer than yes or no. The original threat to open the Artemis III contract broadly was not executed. SpaceX still holds the primary HLS contract. Blue Origin still holds its HLS contract. Dynetics, the third original bidder which was passed over in 2021, has not re-entered the picture. No new companies have been awarded lunar lander contracts through any RFI or RFP process that emerged from October 2025's announcements. In that specific sense, the contract was not reopened. But the architecture of the competition has changed. Artemis III will dock with both HLS vehicles, SpaceX's Starship HLS and Blue Origin's Blue Moon, in Earth orbit in late 2027. The docking test, while not a lunar landing, effectively becomes a head-to-head evaluation of both vehicles' readiness for crewed deep space operations. Isaacman said NASA had not finalized whether it would dock with one or both HLS vehicles, with decisions dependent in part on development progress and launch cadence. That dependency is the quiet reordering of the competition. If Blue Origin's Blue Moon completes its Earth orbit rendezvous and docking test in better condition than SpaceX's Starship HLS, more reliable, faster to certify, more likely to meet the 2028 lunar landing target, the subsequent allocation of Artemis IV and V missions could shift in Blue Origin's favor without any formal contract reopening. The language Isaacman used before the House Appropriations Committee was carefully chosen. He said, NASA aims to test both landers during Artemis III. with decisions dependent on development progress. Dependent on development progress. That is not a guarantee of equal treatment. It is a performance-based framework. Whoever demonstrates more progress gets more access. Whoever demonstrates more readiness gets the mission. The competition Duffy threatened to open in October 2025 was never formally executed, but its effect, a performance-based urgency imposed on both SpaceX and Blue Origin simultaneously, with the lunar landing itself at stake, is fully in force. Starship V3 is on Pad 2 as this is published, 6 days from its first launch. That launch is relevant to the NASA contract question in a direct way. Flight 12 is a suborbital test. But Flight 13 is where SpaceX plans its first orbital attempt with V3. In the orbital propellant transfer demonstration, the milestone NASA required before releasing full HLS contract funding, and that has been consistently delayed across 11 flights, is a target for the V3 orbital campaign. Every V3 flight that successfully demonstrates orbital operations, and eventually propellant transfer, moves SpaceX's HLS timeline closer to the certification NASA needs. Every flight that reveals new problems, a Starship anomaly during orbital insertion, a propellant transfer hardware failure, a heat shield tile loss that grounds the fleet, extends the timeline further and keeps the Artemis IV lunar landing target of 2028 in increasing jeopardy. China's Chang'e 7 mission is heading to the lunar South Pole. China's Chang'e 8 in 2029 will test in-situ resource utilization on the surface. China's crewed lunar program is targeting a landing in the early 2030s. The margin Isaacman described in April 2026, months, not years, is not a rhetorical device. It is derived from mission planning timelines that both the United States and China are publicly executing against. If Artemis IV lands on the moon's south pole in 2028, America arrives before China's crewed program. If Artemis IV slips to 2029 or beyond, the race becomes genuinely uncertain. That is the weight that sits behind Duffy's October 2025 statement, behind Isaacman's February 2026 restructuring, behind the Blue Moon mock-up now sitting at Johnson Space Center, and behind Starship V3 on Pad 2 waiting for its first flight. The question is not whether NASA reopened the contract. The question is whether the companies that hold those contracts can solve a crazy hard problem fast enough to determine who wins the second space race. And the answer to that question is being written in real time, one Starship flight at a time, 6 days from now. One more thread, almost no coverage has pulled on. Duffy was acting NASA Administrator, not confirmed by the Senate, simultaneously serving as Transportation Secretary. His statements carried weight, but not institutional permanence. Isaacman's framing when he restructured Artemis III in February 2026 was markedly different. He called it stepping stones, the Apollo 9 parallel, a rational engineering progression, not a punishment for SpaceX. 2 administrators, 2 tones, the same program. Duffy's threat created urgency. Isaacman's restructuring created a pathway. Both were necessary. Between October 2025 and February 2026, the Artemis program was forced into a more honest accounting of what it could achieve and when. Will NASA reopen the contract? Not unless SpaceX fails to make the Artemis III Earth orbit rendezvous in late 2027. That is the implicit condition. Perform, and the contract holds. Fall short, and the competition Duffy threatened, never formally opened but never formally closed either, becomes the next chapter. The pressure is on, the timeline is set, and the first data point in whether SpaceX can deliver arrives when Starship V3 lifts off from Pad 2 on May 19th.